See, there's a sequel. Wasn't as good.
I think I'm pregnant.
Got there.
Bigot sandwiches.
What the hell are you doing here?
I'll let you do this on your own.
Bigot sandwiches.
You're my people.
Bigot
See, there's a
sandwiches.
sequel. Wasn't as good.
I'm just gonna come out and say it. I'm not talking about the remake. It's shameless. It should have been added in as a patch. The PC port of 1 was awful. The series has more remakes and games at this point, and both of them are actually pointless because you can already play both games on the PS5 because it already has backwards compatibility with the PS4, and 2 already had a PS5 update patch released for it. We gotta remake Alan Wake 2 at this point, bro. I mean, what even is this shit? I didn't pay $70 and enslave a small country to power my PC for a glorified PS1 game. No. What I want to talk about is The Last of Us 2 as a game, as a story, as a form of involuntary self-flagellation. My family was kicking and screaming as I was writing this. They said, "Babe, please, you could walk away from this. You're fermenting 3-year-old thoughts in The Last of Us 2 and all the memes burning a hole in your camera roll don't get to be more important than our relationship. You don't have to put yourself through all this pain again and relive a traumatic period of your life your brain has made an active effort to dissociate you from and make you forget about. It isn't worth it." And in response, I said, "Shut the hell up, bitch. I am the trauma." And I locked myself away and I shit out this script in a 2-hour psychopathic manic-depressive bender fueled by nothing but self-hatred and a slowed mashup of Baby Doll and Perfect Girl because I am not fucking around. Alright, this is my passion project. That One Piece video nobody watched that I spent 5 months on ain't got shit on this video, bro. I have been wanting to talk about this game at length since before I even knew how to make videos. Once I learned that someone has played this game, I have to hold back from unleashing my inner British video essayist. And so I say something tame and unassuming like, yeah, I didn't like the characters, when they ask why I didn't like it, but little does that person know about the pre-written and rehearsed dissertation of things I want to say and am actively holding back. And now, finally I have an excuse to pour out all my thoughts without it feeling out of date. Much like how Naughty Dog dragged this piece of shit kicking and screaming from the grave, I'm doing the same with my opinion of this game, because The Last of Us 2 didn't come out 3.5 years ago, it came out today. But let's take a step back and set the stage because this context is very important for this manic picture I'm painting. Remember when The Last of Us 2 unironically released? June 2020. Other than those 2 really awkward months at the start, which were like a Silent Hill level, 2020 was not a great year to be alive, to put it simply. So in the midst of all this shit going on in the world at the time, the long-awaited sequel to one of my favorite games finally comes out, and even amidst all the leaks and people blindly denouncing the game before it even came out, I still went and bought this game since I wanted to form my own opinion, because I knew that even if I got a direct retelling of the story from like a video or something or a website, it'd still be through someone else's eyes. And I got this game exactly a month after it released on July 20th, and I know that because here's the picture I took right after I bought it, but before I had my cherry violently popped. And you know, it was not only 2020, but it was also summer, so I didn't have jack shit to do and nowhere I could go. So I no-lifed this game and beat it in 3 days. And obviously I didn't fucking like it. If you hadn't picked up on the fact that this is gonna be a negative review, well, you're not very media literate, are you, bud? And I went online to see some reviews because nobody I know has played either of these fucking games, and I wanted to see what other people were saying. And holy shit, this game had one of the 2 biggest shitstorms I've ever seen over a piece of media to date. The other being the ending to Attack on Titan, which resulted in, to this day, just some of the absolutely funniest fucking memes I have ever seen. To see a fan base all losing their minds in solidarity and shitposting as a coping mechanism is something that belongs in psychology books. I'm of the opinion that shitposting is the secret 4.5th stage of grief right before acceptance. But people get upset over things all the time. Why was this game and the ending of Attack on Titan different for me personally? Well, with Attack on Titan, I remember finishing the manga, and after all the awful twists and sudden just like fucking plummet in storytelling in that story after chapter 90, my only thoughts were, you know, at least it's over. The roller coaster went flying off the track at the end and lodged itself into an apartment building 7 blocks downtown, but at least it's over. But then a month later, there were another 8 additional pages released, which completely changed things about the ending right when my delusions were finally over. It just kept getting worse, I couldn't escape it. And with The Last of Us 2, I finished it, indulged in all the memes about it for a month, and forgot I still had my copy. And I knew I wasn't ever gonna replay it again, so I went to GameStop and returned that bitch for $8. Real certified GameStop moment there, by the way, when you just want to return a game and the employee condescends you and says, you're not over 18, you can't trade it in because they read your ID wrong, and then when you correct them, they get an attitude, and then they ask for your phone number, email, and fingerprint, and give you $8 for a $60 product that is in perfect condition. And afterwards, I went into a bit of a Doom phase. 2016 was on sale for $10, and I picked up Doom Eternal on sale for $20. And I was really enjoying both of them, and this was around like the end of July to the middle of August 2020. And so I started forgetting about The Last of Us 2, right? And looked at it as more of a joke. And then one day, a friend let me borrow his copy of Ghost of Tsushima. And I'm thinking, oh sick, I've been wanting to play that game for a while. And even though I can't tell if people are just saying it's good despite The Last of Us 2, I've still heard it's really good. Sucker Punch haven't let me down before. And when I opened the box for Ghost of Tsushima, I see a fucking advertisement for The Last of Us 2. No, I don't want to go back. You can't make me. At the time, I remember that Last of Us 2 overshadowed Ghost of Tsushima because they released at the same time. Ghost of Tsushima, you know, the other Sony exclusive released in summer 2020 about revenge, but which actually did it way better and gave you a choice at the end of the game. And goddamn, bro, that game slapped. I was surprised at how much fun it was. Sucker Punch just comes out of nowhere and goes, hey, so you know how we made one of the most iconic games in the 7th gen and a launch title for the PS4, which is still one of the best looking console games to date? Yeah, well, here's not only our first new game in 6 years and our first new IP in 11, but also the best samurai game ever made. We hope you like it. Okay, bye! Sucker Punch has taken the same place in my heart that Naughty Dog used to occupy. They're the good game developers. They're a lesser known studio. They're my little secret. Nobody knows about them. So even before this remake, this game kept reappearing in my life like some shitty ex-girlfriend who refuses to go to therapy and would rather you listen to her problems than go out and make an effort to fix them herself. And in that month where in my free time I'd go online to see what people were saying, I just kept finding and uncovering more and more awful shit about the game. Every single negative review, comment, forum, thread, and video I saw all just kept bringing up and verbalizing things I'd noticed in my playthrough but couldn't myself put into words, or pointing out more and more new glaring holes in the game's writing and characters that I hadn't noticed because I was just too emotionally numb at that point in my playthrough to care anymore, and I just wanted it to be over. And I kept audibly saying, yes, thank you, on repeat for at least a month. My 3 favorite videos on this game being Naughty Dog's game design is outdated by Nikki Jakey, How to Divide a Fanbase by the Closer Look, and of course, Angry Joe's review.
In fact, you know, why don't you just take all the best guns in the game? I got Molotov cocktails, I got all sorts of really good stuff for you.
Well, what do I get?
Shut up, Ellie! Nobody's talking to you right now!
Although the videos are so funny and all bring up amazing points, and the Closer Looks rewrite of this story, I'm actually pissed we didn't get that version of this story. But anyway, right when I thought it couldn't get worse, oh sick, they put Joel in a scene he isn't actually in during the trailer to preserve the story, which is still crazy. Like, you don't have to go through the lengths of recording a new line of dialogue and swapping out a character model to preserve the story.
What the hell are you doing here?
Right when I thought I knew everything, turns out Troy Baker was coming out here talking about how David from the first game did nothing wrong, how he's a direct mirror to Joel, which reads and sounds like a parody, but he literally did that. My favorite part about this whole thing is that he's talking about how amazing and vague this particular scene is because it's never implied or explicitly stated that David has sexual intentions for Ellie, and as he's saying this, Ashley Johnson, the actor for Ellie, is sitting right next to him, and I love this interaction so much.
Do you think that was sexual? It's never explicitly stated.
You stupid little girl.
I felt like
No, right. This is 100% based on performance.
this is totally.
But it's
I was
What am I
playing it
supposed
as
to tell
I
the
felt
others
that way. But I
there's
think,
nothing that's that the
there's nothing
beauty
in it
of
that-
that. You
yeah.
have to imbue that.
I think
Yeah.
it was.
Then he was responding with a Theodore Roosevelt quote when someone said video games were too long, and he also gave us this gem of a clip after complaining about how he doesn't understand people having opinions on art.
I don't get you, man. Or girl. I say man in a very non-gender specific way. I don't get you. It's weird.
The amount of times where I have referenced this exact clip in day-to-day conversation only for people to look at me like I'm crazy is far too great to count. You know, I could explain it and then fix everything, but I think it's funnier not to. And right when I thought it couldn't get worse, after all the things I just mentioned, I learned that Ian Alexander, the actor who plays Lev, is actually just racist. Of all the bad things about this game, poor writing, shallow characters, massive story leaks, like a cute little cherry on top, it also just had to have an actor who made racist tweets a few years ago, because of course it did. And I gotta say, I love this exclusively online way of speaking where people will say something like, not to be horribly offensive, but, and then follow up the butt with the most wild shit ever. Ironically prefacing the fact that you're being racist doesn't negate the fact that you're being racist. Not to be racist, besties, but the Chinese are literally a subspecies. Like, you can't just say things like that and expect it to be fine because you said not to be racist beforehand, and also because you're targeting white people as if they aren't a race. That's just not cool, dude. And I said dude in a very non-gender specific. And usually with racist tweets, you can kind of write them off as being from a long time ago for the person who's even really famous. But no, as you can see, almost all of these tweets are from 2017, when the game had already been announced, was 3 years from release, and was actively being marketed. In fact, this one from November 22nd was just a little more than 2 weeks before there was a PSX presentation on the game on December 9th. I remember the whole narrative around this game was either you like it and you're an idiot, or you don't like it and you're an idiot who doesn't understand deep writing. I was so conflicted seeing people's reactions to this game and how they either blindly loved it and called people who didn't a transphobe, or people who hated it and called people who liked it cucks, and then forming my own opinion from all of that was so much more enjoyable and a much better story of how there's no good guys or bad guys in the actual game was. Because I mean, let's be real here, both sides were fucking idiots. Not only is it literally just a video game, but to see someone not like the game and immediately go, it's because it has trans people, isn't it? Or to see someone who likes it and say, no, this game sucks because it's woke and has gay people and black people in power in it, are both stupid reactions. I even saw some people complain that this game sucks because a woman helped write it, because apparently we've regressed back to the 1940s where a loud minority see women or any race other than a white person playing an important role in a fictional story and immediately label it as blackwashing and propaganda. Like, dog, just say you're racist, alright? Stop calling things with black people and women woke and attempting to hide behind that, and just admit you're racist and sexist. It's a lot easier, alright? There were people sending death threats to Laura Bailey, the actor who played Abby, saying, I'm gonna kill you, or I'm gonna kill your, at the time, 2-year-old child in front of you. There were people sending death threats and racist comments and Neil Druckmann, and there were people making a bunch of homophobic and transphobic memes about the game, which regardless if they were ironic or not, all those things combined to create this idea that anyone who doesn't like this game is racist, transphobic, or is too stupid to understand the story. So then people who did enjoy the game would see any form of criticism, no matter how valid or well thought out, and immediately attack the person saying you just don't like it because you're a transphobe, because you're racist, and they'd ironically become the very same ignorant and blind people who they made fun of, which was so poetic in the worst way possible. And the people who enjoy the game responding like that would only perpetuate this massive fucking conflict. Because that's just how social media works. Someone casually sitting back and saying, I do/don't like this thing, but if you don't agree, that's totally fine, doesn't get attention. What gets attention is someone going, fuck you, this game sucks because black people. And that negativity from both sides just kept feeding off of one another. And I wish I could say eventually everyone started being reasonable, but nope, there are still people that refuse to accept that in this world of 8 billion people, not everyone is a carbon copy of them with the exact same opinions. So before I legitimately start on this game, I want to clarify that it doesn't matter what you think of this game. If you like it, I'm still really gonna question you, and realistically, no matter what you say to me, you still aren't gonna change my mind. And whenever someone mentions they like this game, I'm always gonna think of this meme and Squirty McBooger balls, but I'm not gonna insult you over that. And I also acknowledge that you're welcome to your own opinion, who cares? I'm not gonna go on a 3-minute rant about how I don't understand people that criticize art and then mollywop you at the end with the, and I say man in a very non-gender specific way. Because I know full well that there's rational people on both sides that are capable of sitting down and having a discussion. They're just drowned out by actual lunatics and people who have no significant achievements in life and think that liking this game makes them smarter than other people because they're media literate, unlike those idiots. You just don't get it. It's a really profound story where none of the characters in the zombie apocalypse die from infection, and how humans are the real bad guys, which is already done in 28 Days Later, Dead Rising, The Walking Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Night of the Living Dead. Those last two, by the way, which came out back in the fucking 70s. So legitimately starting off Joel's death, a group of people sat down in a room and said, let's have Joel get beaten to death with a golf club in the first 2 hours, and everyone else went, yo, that shit's gas! Actually, they wrote much more heinous shit than that, because Hallie Gross herself has said that originally she wrote the scene to be much more graphic and violent, with some not so savory no-no words said to Joel, but didn't go beyond that. So I don't know what she was describing, but just remember that it was originally a lot worse.
Questions of trash. I will actually say I will say I wrote a much more brutal version of that scene.
Whoa.
And Neil made me pull a bunch of stuff out. I won't go into what there was, but there were some lines of dialogue that were like that got yanked.
And going into the game, I knew Joel died, but I didn't know how early it was into the game. And you know, oddly enough, I didn't feel anything. I've had several other character deaths in stories and games spoiled for me, which I'm not gonna say, but those still impacted me when I first experienced them. But Joel, nothing really, honestly. And so I figured, alright, you must be really fucking confident in the story you want to tell after this, if such a momentous thing like this is just a setup for everything afterwards in this story. And for a plethora of reasons I'll get into, what followed after this moment did not live up to my expectations. And neither did Joel's death. Now before I blindly say Joel would never tell strangers his name, I remember Neil addressing pretty much every problem I have with Joel's death in a podcast around the game's release because of just how common a criticism it was, and also because everything surrounding this game's release I have a fucking photographic memory for. I'm telling you, I wasn't kidding when I said I wasn't fucking around earlier. This video required zero research with how much I replayed the first game and how much I hated the second. And to sum up Neil's defense of the way Joel died, he said that this is a Joel who's become more trusting after living in Jackson. He doesn't see a girl the same age as Ellie as a threat. They take in strangers all the time in Jackson. In this world, it doesn't matter if you're a good guy or a bad guy because nobody gets a heroic death. And it being disrespectful isn't a valid criticism because then, by that logic, if a character dies or goes through anything difficult, then it's disrespectful. And also by that logic, Sarah's death would be disrespectful, which, oh my god, is there so much to unpack there. Let me list it off. So this is a Joel that has been softened and become more trusting after his experience with Ellie in the first game, and after living in this town for 4 years where they always take in strangers. Alright, I'm with you, except in the first game, Joel drives past a family on the side of the road, and that's before he knows how serious the outbreak is. That's a version of Joel who only knows pre-outbreak life, who hasn't lost Sarah yet, and he's still that paranoid and untrusting because he wants to protect the people around him. Wouldn't that version of Joel kick into gear knowing that Tommy's in the room with him? In the first game, it took Joel until halfway through the story for him to trust Ellie with a gun. Even Bill of all fucking people, the guy who jerry-rigged half a town and immediately held Joel at gunpoint to see if he was infected, told Joel that he should have given Ellie a gun. And it took Joel literally almost drowning for him to change his mind and trust Ellie with a gun. When Joel first met Sam and Henry, he was still really reluctant to tell them his name. But another thing Neil repeats is that this isn't Joel from the first game, which is kind of crazy to admit that a character is completely different in a sequel than the first game, but whatever. Except in this game, up until his death, Joel has been just as paranoid as he was in the first game because he keeps telling Ellie and even Jesse to be careful on their trails. Joel even tells Ellie in one of the flashbacks to keep her mask on in case someone sees them. But for the sake of the plot, I'm just supposed to accept this core aspect of the character that's been there since literally day one, all of a sudden just disappears off screen after 25 years because he spent 1/5 of those years living in this shitty replica town. And that anything I believe about this scene isn't valid because Neil knows these characters better than I do.
That's the thing that's hard with making a sequel is like with the first game, there's no expectations. People don't know Joel and Ellie. And now some people think they know them better than we know them, right?
No, fuck that. I refuse to believe that Joel would have just unlearned 20 years of conditioning after 5 years living a semi-normal life. If anything, I believe he'd get even more paranoid because now he's opened himself up again after so long and has quite a lot to lose for the first time in a long time. The reason these are such common criticisms is because they didn't portray any of that supposed Joel is more trusting of people now before this scene. Yes, Joel's house has wood carvings and a guitar and all that, but him having hobbies doesn't immediately correlate with I'd now trust total strangers. Troy Baker immediately comes to Neil's defense and says that actually it's his fault as an actor for not conveying that side of Joel in this scene well enough, because there is a thought there where Joel thinks this is what I get for opening up, when no, in reality, man, that just wasn't at all hinted at before this scene. I mean, if you don't want to make a bunch of scenes showing Joel trusting strangers or losing his touch, you could have at least had him say, oh shit, and reach for his gun or something. That would have gotten your point across. I mean, I still wouldn't have liked it, but it'd be better. But nope, the closest we get is this small moment right here. You see that small flinch he did backwards when he sees Abby's gun? That's the moment they're talking about. That little step back, yeah, that's it. That's supposed to satisfy you if you think Joel wouldn't become soft. No, look, see, it's the same Joel. He took the tiny step back. Look, it's right there. Imagine if in God of War Ragnarok, when you fight Thor at the beginning, Kratos says, you act like you've heard of me, and the developers try to pass that off as, yeah, this is a Kratos who's old now and has a kid. Look, see, they have a house together. Kratos trusts people. And then you spend the whole game hunting Thor only to Dude, I can't even fucking say that as a joke. This game's plot is so stupid. It speaks volumes as to how bad this game's plot is when every time you try and tell it with other characters, it sounds like a joke. And as for the whole nobody gets a heroic death in this world and the disrespectful part, I mean, yeah, the first game had sudden death like Sarah's or Henry's and Sam, but the difference there is that nobody ever said those were disrespectful. Nobody ever said it was disrespectful for Ellie and Joel as characters to go through shit along their journey. And the difference between those deaths and this one is that you didn't play as and spend a whole game connecting with Sarah, and none of the deaths in the first game were slow. They were sudden and dramatic, yes, and they weren't heroic, but you weren't ever forced to sit there and watch a character you love slowly get beaten to death with the two people in this world they value the most helpless to do anything but watch and then have their corpse spit on. And to remind you, that's a tamed down version of this scene. The original was much more gruesome. To say that that's just what happens in this world when we didn't have anything near that bad in the first game is insane. One of the original versions of this scene involved Joel actually getting stabbed in the back by Abby and then having the knife twisted around to paralyze and torture him. How are you gonna say
No one loves these characters more than we do.
and then literally, not metaphorically, literally stab your main character in the back?
And all I ask is the fans of the first ones, put some faith in us, trust us, we're gonna do right by you. So,
Damn straight.
Shut the fuck up, Kanji. I don't hate this game just because Joel died. It's the fact that there was no build up to it, and it felt like they killed him off because they didn't know what to do with his character. Oh wait, they did. They literally said that. Instead of such a massive moment as this being the climax of this story, you play as Joel for 5 minutes and it's treated as the setup. Originally, Abby was gonna stay in Jackson for a bit undercover until she eventually got to Joel, then killed him. But that was scrapped because then there wouldn't have been enough time for the rest of the story they wanted to tell. And then Ellie and Dina go to Seattle to find Abby, and immediately, I'm gonna have to stop you right there. I know it's only been like 7 minutes from the last thing I mentioned, but already you've gone against everything previously established in the first game 5 times now. During my playthrough, I remember this odd underlying feeling that the story kept jumping around a lot, that what was happening and where we were kept changing just for no reason and without any explanation. And then I really thought about where part 2 takes place, and it hit me. You may not have even noticed because the game glossed over them, but along with Dina and Ellie just teleporting to Seattle, already there's been a journey that rivaled the beginning third of the first game in length, which is Abby and her friend's journey to and from Jackson back to Seattle, which is, with all the conveniences of the modern world and using the fastest route, 885 miles one way. Multiply that by 2. Oh, sick. There was a 1,770 mile long journey through post-outbreak America, which we're supposed to just ignore and not even question before this game was even really officially started. Keep in mind, the journey in the first game from Boston, Lincoln, then to Pittsburgh is 2,327 miles, and here's all the shit that happened in the first game in that time. And I haven't even mentioned the fact that Tommy already made the journey to Seattle before Dina and Ellie got there, along with the fact that Jesse also makes it later on day 2. Alright, sick. So 5 characters made an 885 mile long journey to Seattle off screen and it's never brought up. And you may be thinking, oh, you're just nitpicking, a suspension of disbelief and all that. And the thing about that is, if this maybe happened once, I could excuse it. But this happens not only 5 times here in days 1 and 2, where characters cross an entire time zone 5 times, but there is also 8 more instances of this in the story. 8. So there's in total 13 massive journeys the characters take that we see literally none of, simply because the plot requires them to be in this place. I'll detail the rest later on, but the most ridiculous example of this is the 6th one in day 3, where everyone in the theater are all very seriously injured. Ellie had her arm broken, Tommy got shot in the head and also in the leg with an arrow, and Dina had a fucking arrow in her shoulder and her skull bashed in. And somehow, with all of those factors, in this awful situation where the most capable person has a broken arm and their horse was dead, shout out to Shimmer and Callus, they did nothing wrong, Ellie was able to take the 2 of them the 885 miles back to Jackson, which Hallie Gross herself has directly said took them 3 months on horseback.
First drafted in-game dialogue for the Seattle arrival, and I wrote it very much later than it is now because I was like, well, they've been on the road for 3 months.
A person who was shot in the head, a woman anywhere from her 2nd to 5th month of pregnancy, 885 miles across America, which was a 3-month journey even on horseback with no medical attention in that time. Okay. At the end of the game, Tommy can't go kill Abby, but he can't make it back to Jackson after being freshly crippled. And I say the two of them because the game never makes any mention of what Ellie did with Jesse after that point. You know, at the very least, I would have liked to see that scene, you know, how the people in Jackson reacted after seeing Ellie come back with a broken arm, Jesse's parents reacting to his death, Tommy essentially just being almost dead and crippled, and Dina injured. That maybe could have been a cool scene, but nope, fade to black, smash cut to Abby flashback. In fact, I really would have loved to see how day-to-day life in Jackson plays out. That would have been really interesting to see how a recovering city functions in this world and how Joel and Ellie have been living for the last 4 years, but it doesn't make any appearances in the current story again after the opening. Ellie was traveling in literally worse conditions in the first game, and without a trained smuggler with 20 years of survival experience to help her, and somehow we're supposed to ignore that and be fine with that. Remember how Joel got impaled in the first game, and it led to this whole chapter where they had to stay in one place for 2 months as he slowly recovered, which led to one of the most emotional moments in the game, along with an entire DLC to expand upon how Ellie handled that? Yeah, me neither. But that was only the 6th journey of the total 13 in part 2. There's also the flashback where Joel and Ellie separately go back to the hospital in Salt Lake City, which is 254 miles away from Jackson City. And with the way the scene is written, we're supposed to just believe that Joel was only a couple minutes behind Ellie the entire time. And then their journey back to Jackson. In the first game, the journey between Jackson and the hospital, all this shit happened, which brings our total amount of teleportation trips up to 9. Number 10 is Abby and Lev just kind of casually sailing the 1,151 miles from Seattle to Santa Barbara, where again, we're supposed to just assume nothing of note happened or went wrong in that time. And the 11th and 12th one are my favorite. Ooh, I love these ones so much. And they are Ellie's journey from her farm near Jackson to Santa Barbara and then back to her fucking farm, which is 1,009 miles one way. So multiply that by 2 and oh sick, Ellie just casually travels 2,018 miles off screen by herself. The second half of that 2,018 miles whilst injured, by the way. And a bit of a geography lesson here. That trip from Jackson, Wyoming to Santa Barbara, California would have taken Ellie across not just the Rocky Mountains, but wait for it because you're gonna love this, the Mojave. Ellie traveled so far to get to Abby that she crossed through another post-apocalyptic game about how there's no bad guys, which did it 100 times better than hers, by the way, and we're supposed to not even question the logistics of that. So this dumb bitch went through NCR territory and Death Valley twice. Alone. The entire first game was 3,552 miles of travel between 8 separate places, and here Ellie is just casually making a round trip of 2,018 miles through a climate and geographical features she's never even seen or dealt with before. And just as a reminder, because this is still ridiculous, Death Valley. And the final 13th reason why is when Abby and Lev were sailing off into the 100-mile-away sunset on Catalina Island immediately after Abby had just been stabbed in both shoulders and cut several times without any preparation or medical attention beforehand. And since after you beat the game, the title screen changes to this, it's very obviously implied that they did make it. You know, I'm more than certain they would have survived that journey in their shitty little wooden boat after being tied up for seemingly months. And much like me when this game first came out, you're probably thinking, wow, that's insane, but it can't get worse though, right? Ellie's journey to California was originally supposed to be longer. Originally, they wanted Ellie to go to fucking Mexico. They were literally gonna have her go to a different country for this bitch.
And then I forget, Hallie, I was like, for a while we're going down into Mexico, and the whole last showdown took place in Mexico before we moved it to Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
But
I want you to know that one of the original premises for the first game was to have Tess hunt Joel, and also an infection that only affected women. Just wanted to put that out there. Tess was going to track down Joel and Ellie because her brother died in a crossfire in the QZ, and she blamed Joel for it. And then at the end of the game, she tortured Joel to tell her where Ellie is, and then Ellie would save Joel and kill Tess, who'd be the first person Ellie would kill. But eventually that ended up being scrapped because vengeance/anger wasn't a strong enough motivation for Tess to track down Joel and Ellie across a destroyed United States without, and I fucking quote, making her turn into a cartoon character. The Last of Us 2, besides all those journeys I just mentioned, already goes back on this in the first 2 hours, where Ellie is so insistent on going to Seattle that she says she's willing to do it on foot. That is, at minimum, a 13-day, 885-mile walk on foot through post-outbreak America in the winter for the sake of revenge. And then of course you add every other trip I mentioned, along with Abby also making this ridiculous trip across the US to kill Joel, and already, like you said you didn't want to in the first game, you turn both your main characters into cartoon characters. But they were so far up their ass on telling the story about hate and the cycle of violence that they didn't even stop to consider, hey, maybe after 7 years of waiting, people don't want to play this entirely new character we made just for the sake of this failed plot Brucey explicitly told us wouldn't work. Maybe we should just focus on making the game that's already there in the flashbacks. And normally I wouldn't harp on this. In Uncharted or action movies, you aren't supposed to question the logistics of travel because they're not meant to be grounded in reality. The same reason I don't care about things like, oh, how does Ellie fit all the stuff in her backpack, or how does wrapping your arm with a bandage heal a gunshot wound? It's because it's a video game. But the difference between those things and what I'm getting at is that the entire point of the first game was about how difficult and dangerous this journey was, and showing off what's happened in the world and how different people in different places handled that. I'm just playing by the rules you established and hammered home in the first game and then seemingly forgot in this one. I have played The Last of Us at least 5 times. In fact, I own an original PS3 copy of that fucking game. And you want to know what it says on the back of the box? It says Joel and Ellie, brought together by harsh circumstance, must survive a brutal journey across the US and a dangerous post-pandemic world. But now we just have 13 journeys across extremely dangerous geography that we just skip over, and literally anything that could have happened in that time just because the plot needs the character to be in this place. In the same game where you try and tell me that 2 teenagers barely made it out of Jackson before turning into infected and one of them having to shoot themselves in the head because of how dangerous this world is, you also expect me to just ignore the main character making an 885-mile journey with 2 injured people, one of which is pregnant, and also waltzing through a 4-way political conflict over a poker chip. Imagine the first game Tess got ready to fight Fedra and then the game just cut to black and you were in Lincoln. Imagine if Joel got impaled and the game just smash cut to them in Utah. The entirety of The Last of Us takes place over the course of 8 or so months, from the beginning of August until April 28th. And the changing of seasons and environments, along with all the different characters and obstacles Joel and Ellie faced along the way, really helped convey how long their journey was and give each stage of the story and journey a distinct feeling. And yes, I'm aware that the first game glosses over massive distances, but the difference there is that the end goal never changed, and it still gave you enough glimpses of difficulty to where you got to picture how arduous this journey was at each stage, while still progressing the plot without showing you each and every single boring second of it. There's a difference, right, between a time skip to keep up the pacing and story and ignoring entire game's worth of potential story, conflict, character development, and world building just because you need a character to be in this place for the plot, only to then immediately teleport them somewhere else. The most that the first game skipped is 2 or so months of the journey from Pittsburgh to Jackson, which is 1,759 miles, which yes, is ridiculous, but like I said earlier, I'd be willing to overlook this kind of thing if it happened once. Every other time skip in the first game is completely reasonable. The only other things it skips are a 471-mile horse ride to the university, which even if we use a lower average number of miles a horse can travel in a day, would take them just 18 days, but obviously apocalypse, so I'd say it's closer to a month and a half or so. A 6-hour, 15-mile walk to Lincoln from Boston, and a 9-hour, 242-mile car ride from Lincoln to Pittsburgh, and all of those are all perfectly reasonable. Aside from those massive distances, in part 2, Neil and Hallie had nothing of note to say, and knew that a story on hate and the cycle of violence couldn't span a bunch of different locations, so 90% of the game is the exact same overall location and set pieces, with small changes here and there, and the entire main story, so Abby and Ellie in Seattle, all takes place over the course of just 3 days, and so all this character development and these dramatic events all happening in such a close proximity to one another just make the pacing feel so breakneck fast that when you look at it in a real world timeline, nothing in it makes sense. In the course of just 3 days, all of Abby's friends die, and she undergoes this massive emotional transformation and is willing to turn on people she's known for 4 years, all because of a kid and his sister she didn't even know existed until 2 days ago. In just 3 days, Ellie goes from a wet blanket version of herself from the first game to this traumatized, remorseful killer who's only willing to give up on her revenge quest after seeing that Dina is sick. But also, nothing interesting happened in that 3-month journey with Dina to Seattle. These 3 days in Seattle, yes, very important. Completely alters all these characters. Now 3 months here and back, no, don't worry about it. To bring up some smaller points I have so this video isn't just like an entire thesis every time the characters take like 2 steps, because unlike this game's story, I understand pacing and the importance from a passive consumer's perspective of interspersing small points in between massive chunks of information rather than front loading all of the important stuff and telling them back to back, because originally they were going to tell Abby and Ellie's story side by side, but then cut that and chose to tell them in one giant block after the other. Who the fuck approved that? I want to talk about the gameplay because genuinely it is so much fun. All the different ways you can handle combat, from the usual guns blazing or using stealth to just flat out avoiding them, which if you want to avoid a part 3 where Alan's children come back to kill Ellie, I'd highly recommend, and how massive and sprawling each level is, all make this game feel like the peak of what is possible with this linear style of game design. The human AI and gore in this game is so good, and it makes dealing with them a joy because they challenge you and make you think without it ever feeling unfair. I mean, the first time you meet the Seraphites as Ellie in the forest, the TV station, the red tunnel with the flare, the section in Hillcrest, before you meet Jesse, and the entire bit of day 3 where you're in your little boat with your hood up. So good. I think about those encounters and I start getting fond memories of my playthrough, but then I remember the rest of this game and just watch someone else play them on YouTube while eating yogurt, and that's usually enough to scratch the itch for me. And the small things in this game too, like the way the rain is muffled when you're in interiors, the way the glass shatters is so good. This game is an absolute technical marvel on so many levels, but for the time in between where you aren't blowing off an infected's lower half and having it crawl towards you, pretty much identically to the first game, you're just walking around pressing triangle a whole bunch. And aside from Seattle Day 1, where the game is just kind of open world but not really, the game consists of you seeing the objective in the distance and then your companion or the main character repeatedly commenting on how close you are to it as you make your way there, and then oh no, something breaks along the way and now you have to take a detour. And yes, the first game did this too, but in the first game it was fine because every level felt and looked so different, and simply just because the distance between where you were and thing in the distance wasn't as far as it is in the second game. And it wasn't as tedious in the first game because there wasn't a previous game from 7 years ago that you could compare it with. And also the first game, like I said, was literally about the journey in between here and there, because that's where Ellie and Joel's relationship blossomed. But in part 2, the cycle was pretty much just, okay, I have to go to the hospital, but seeing as I don't know where to go after that, we're gonna find something along the way to give us our next immediate objective. And the cycle of go to place to kill someone and get info. Look, there's place, we're approaching place, we've accomplished goal at place, now what? Go to place, continues until the end of both Seattle sections.
TV station. Oh. Spy all these tall buildings. That way. Hey, that round building. It looks like the TV station from your map.
Yeah, there it is. Stay low. There's the hospital. Fuck. Thought I'd be closer. There's the hospital. Not much farther. Right. Hospital. Better still be there, Nora. The aquarium. It's right next to that Ferris wheel.
I think Abby picked the aquarium on purpose because it's so damn hard to get to.
Jesus. How the hell are we crossing this?
There you are. Okay. Back to that damn Ferris wheel.
Look, Fob, sweet Fob. Almost there.
What if Owen's somewhere else?
He's there. All right. Owen.
That's the building we need to get to.
Okay, I see it. Getting closer to your tall building.
Hey, look! You can see the hospital now! Oh, fuck!
The hospital. It's right there. There's the marina.
How do we get to the marina from here?
And unlike 1, where as cheesy as it is, the journey along the way is the main focus, there's really nothing of note in between then and now in part 2, besides combat encounters that, if I'm gonna be honest, for as fun as they are to play, all play out like this. I remember this feature of NPCs having names and calling out to each other was a massive point of contention, because for some reason people thought that shooting someone's dog in the face with an exploding arrow and then hearing them yell out, "No, Scrungy!" and then stabbing them in the throat was a bit too brutal. But other people were like, hell yeah, that's awesome. But me personally, I never really felt one way or the other about it. I don't know, there's just like a disconnect in my brain where I don't feel bad doing messed up things in a video game because I know it isn't real, but I don't find enjoyment in it either. It's why whenever I played GTA or something, I never just sit there and go on a mindless rampage outside of missions. In fact, I only ever go out of my way to kill civilians in a video game if they're blocking my way into a building or they annoy me for some reason. Going on a rampage in Infamous is fun because the powers are fun, not the act of killing people. Having someone shoot at you in Dishonored, stopping time, and then possessing their friend and walking them into their bullet is fun because this is fucking cool. But there is an exception to the named NPC rule. I'm sure some of you might already know who I'm talking about, and while I know this video is more lighthearted in tone, this next part is going to be a bit more serious, and I would just like to address the sudden shift in tone, because I would like to use this video as a chance to finally get to talk about and honor what is, in my opinion, the funniest part of this whole fucking game, which is Danny. Oh my god, I'm actually shaking. This fucking scene, the amount of memes that have stemmed from it, the amount of times I've lost my shit laughing at this scene. Genuinely, this might be one of the funniest cutscenes I've ever seen in a video game. I don't know if I said this previously, but playing this game was the first time I've ever seen a video game story, especially one of this quality on a presentation level. And throughout my entire playthrough, I just kept asking myself, what the the fuck is this? And this Danny moment is pretty early into Abby's section, so as I was still emotionally wrestling with playing as Abby, the game just busts out this scene and goes, Danny's dead. And at this moment, this exact moment, my mind went over a tipping point.
Berkeley is back.
Oh, Berkeley.
Yes.
Who the fuck?
To this day, aside from all the jokes and people ironically saying Danny is important, I genuinely can't tell if this is supposed to be a significant death or not. Like, Danny is mentioned again later on, and this whole encounter he had with Owen was pretty significant to Owen's character, but at the same time, who the fuck is Danny? At first, when Nora opened the bag, I thought it was someone I killed, but then she said that a scar killed him, and I was just sat there thinking, what the fuck is this?
My friend Rudy, so I call
Who's
Rudy.
Rudy? Who's Rudy? Yeah, who's Rudy? Who's Rudy?
You know who Rudy is. Come on.
You know who Rudy is? I don't know.
You
Who
know
the fuck is Rudy? I don't know anyone named
last
Rudy.
month, the Lollipop Club, you know who Rudy was dancing.
You know Rudy? I don't.
To conclude the gameplay section, this game has all the standard Naughty Dog isms, I guess you can call them. You know, boosting someone up or holding open a door, and the other person goes on the other side of the door to hold it up for you. And no, they're not unique to this game or the first. In fact, they're all over Uncharted. But I remember when I was playing Uncharted 4, I was thinking, alright, you know, it was kind of funny before, and it's kind of funny every now and then, but now you can stop. Like, any more than this, and it goes from a cheeky little thing to actually just being annoying. And the worst offender of all, this shit pissed me off so much, I still vividly remember this, is that they put a boost right before you get back to the theater as Abby. After suffering through Abby's section and coming out the other end a hollow shell, I was so excited to finally see the climax of this game be told. And the game has the fucking temerity to put a boost right before it. After 10 hours, I am dying to see the end results of my main character being held at gunpoint and if Tommy's dead or not. And I have to sit there and watch the exact same animation I've seen over 15 times now, not to mention in every other Naughty Dog game. You're finally about to confront Ellie and then just, Lamau, give me a boost, bro. Abby finally shows up at the theater and then boom, flashback. Yo, look at this fucking zebra, dog. Before I really get into Abby's section, I want to talk about Dina. Dina is supposed to be like the one somewhat lighthearted part of this game, and to represent that a little bit of The Last of Us 1 Ellie is still in the current wet blanket version, except, oh my god, is Dina an asshole. The way she treats Jesse in this game, or just a few days after breaking up with him, she's out here dancing with random people in front of him, and then she just flat out ignores him and asks someone else to dance right in front of him, and then kisses that person in full view for him to see. She broke up with Jesse, and then not only kissed Ellie a few days later, but was out here having what I assumed to be weed sex because they aren't wearing any clothes. Come on, man, weed sex after a week? That's like at least a month 3 kind of thing. And then when he catches them like this, they treat him like the asshole in the situation. And I hate this love triangle, but not really dynamic, that they have with Jesse later on in Seattle. That makes everything feel so unnecessarily awkward. For how fucked up what Dina and Ellie did to him, there is way too little conflict or a sense of resentment from Jesse. And it feels like the writers just had him be fine and chill with it, even though that is not at all the reaction anyone would have in the situation, just because otherwise it would have bogged down this shit ass plot I want to tell. And the only time Jesse does address the situation seriously, it's written as a joke. And I'm just sat there thinking, no, he's right. Objectively, it is a fucked up thing to do. Imagine you're Jesse. You and your partner are friends with the same person, and then immediately after you and your partner break up, your partner goes and starts kissing this person in a public place, and your friend starts reciprocating those feelings, meaning that for your entire relationship, even if it was on and off, your partner had feelings they were hiding for this friend you both mutually knew, and that friend had feelings for your partner the entire time you and them were in a relationship, and then a week later you catch them having sex together and now they're calling each other babe. It's so fucked up on both Dina and Ellie's part. Like, Ellie, run. I don't care how much you like Dina. Someone who immediately hops in and out of a relationship like that is going to fuck up your life, I can promise you. And I knew it was coming. When you had to escort Dina out of the tunnel because suddenly she was sick, I remember thinking, please don't be pregnant, because that was the lowest hanging and most stereotypical explanation I could think of. I knew it was coming, but I still sat there and thought the next words out of her mouth in this scene cannot be I'm pregnant, because that's the stupidest shit ever. I literally remember thinking, I swear to God, I swear to whatever fucking higher power above, if you say you're pregnant, and then of course Dina says she's pregnant, and the reason she held off on this for so long because she didn't want to be a burden. Much like Danny, I don't know how this scene is going to be taken, because what Ellie is saying is 100% right here. So am I supposed to be like, no Ellie, how could you? You're supposed to be nice, when objectively being mad at Dina is the right thing here because she is a burden. happen, but I'm also not supposed to legitimately be mad at Dina because the next day they've already made up apparently, and Ellie's calling her babe again. Dina is now the biggest burden possible, in fact, because now can she not fight or protect herself, but her life is worth twice as much now. And is this reason of I don't want to be a burden realistic? Yes, people do this all the time, but it's still just as fucking annoying in a video game as it is in real life. Just because something is realistic doesn't make it compelling from a story perspective. That's like saying that just because something is based off a true story, that automatically makes it good. I hate the, yeah, but it's realistic defense in video games. This is literally one of my least favorite things. When people can't stick up for themselves or are too stupid to look at a situation and say, yeah, I'd make this worse, I need to leave, and insist on putting themselves and other people in danger just because they don't want to inconvenience anyone, and are so persistent on helping other people that they end up circling around and doing the exact opposite and becoming a liability. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, or some pretentious video essay or shit like that.
Alright guys, who ate the tacos? Was it Billy, Michael, or Jose Hernandez Lopez Ramirez Garcia Flores de El Castillo Cabello?
And that ties into genuinely my least favorite part of this game. There are a lot of other things I'll touch on, but this next thing in particular is what really dragged this game down and made it feel like a fucking slog. And that's this game's unrelenting obsession with shallow character drama. The game you're playing is a post-outbreak story where you're killing zombies, but then in the cutscenes, it's a fucking reality TV show with exes showing up out of nowhere and people cheating and pregnancy scares and love triangles and people walking and other people having sex, and I just don't care. To have all this surface level drama is already bad enough, but to have it in a setting where it doesn't at all fit the world and told through characters you don't care about makes it all infinitely worse and more boring to watch and play. It feels like the only reason the infected are in this game is to give you something to kill in between the cutscenes of watching people awkwardly avoid elephants in the room or yelling at each other. They expect you to care about characters just because they have trauma or have flaws or pet dogs. These characters are flawed, yes, but they aren't interesting to watch. They're just bad people and that's it. And that's a very important thing to remember when you're writing a flawed character, is to make sure that as awful human as they are, they're still interesting and entertaining to watch. Joel being an obvious example, but in recent memory, I watched Wolf of Wall Street for the first time, and without derailing this entire video into a review of that movie, to sum it up as simply as possible, Jordan Belfort is an absolutely horrible person, but an amazing character, and it's so endlessly entertaining to watch him throughout that movie. If you've seen it, you know what I mean. If you don't, go watch the movie. But either way, my point still stands. Arthur Morgan is a flawed character, and so are Edward Kenway from Black Flag and Vito Scaletta from Mafia 2, just to name a few off the top of my head. Aside from the characters in The Last of Us 2 not having any interesting flaws besides being shitty surface level people and cheating on their pregnant partners with their exes or being really intent on killing people, they're all just so fucking boring. A big part of that is that all the new characters introduced on Abby's side have nothing unique going for them, other than Abby's friend who was there when Joel died, Abby's friend who was there when Joel died, and Abby's amigo who was there comiendo fucking huevos rancheros and burritos when Joel died. They all share the exact same setup, so you can essentially just swap them out with each other and nothing is lost. And when the core thing uniting all these characters is as significant as that, anything extra you attempt to add onto them and their characters is trivial in comparison. I murdered your father figure. Also, my papi has Parkinson's and we eat burritos, pendejo, pa que tu lo sepa, puñeta. Mierda, coño, me cago la fucking pinga. And with the way the story is told, there's no point connecting with them either because all their development happens when you know they're gonna die. Sarah had something like half an hour of gameplay, and I still cry when I see that scene because the build up to it is amazing and it's so unexpected. But with these characters, I guess they were going for, by making you kill them as Ellie and then seeing them as Abby, they're trying to go for a shock value and make you go, oh wow, I killed that guy and he was a person. Except this is a story, and when you already know what happens to these characters and they have to compete with 7 other identical versions of themselves, you as a viewer lose interest. And even if you do like any of them for some reason, it isn't as if any of them are coming back for a sequel. You can tell that the writers knew making you care about and developing each and every one of Abby's friends was way too much to expect from players and to do as writers, because there were 7 other people there when Joel died. Leah, Nick, Jordan, Nora, Mel, and Manny. And half of them, Leah, Nick, and Jordan, literally just don't matter, and the game doesn't even attempt to flesh them out because the time it would take to genuinely do so would take way too long. Without you even doing anything, Nick, Jordan, and Leah all die off screen or in a cutscene, and they aren't given any development beyond that. The game is trying to make me feel bad about my choices because I killed this random person who's also a full-fledged human being, but also doesn't attempt to give them any development other than they have a name and were there when Joel died. And when you as a writer do that, you're basically just indirectly saying, yeah, they aren't important. Probably should have said this when I was talking about the ending, but whatever. Even if you got revenge in this game, even if you killed Abby, or there was a choice to kill Abby, with everything else that happens in the story, it'd still be a shit story. Some people kill Joel and you go and kill a bunch of named characters who aren't at all developed, and in the process lose everything and enforce the worst part of Ellie's character that we had already overcome in the first game, and that relationship with Joel you love so much is completely ruined. Why do we need to tell the story? Fuck you, that's why. You look at characters from the first game like Sam and Hannah, Henry, Tess, Bill, and Sarah, who all had small amounts of screen time but were still extremely memorable. And the reason that people connected with them and enjoyed them is obviously because first and foremost they were well written, but also because they all brought something different to the table with their backgrounds and interactions. Also, why do so many characters in this game die too? In the first game it was only 5, Sarah, Henry, Sam, Tess, and Marlene, but in this game it's like 11, right? It's all of Abby's friends, which is 7, then Joel, Jesse, Isaac, and Yara. I don't know, I'm probably missing a couple, but even if I am, just that alone, why so many characters die in this game, and they're all new characters too, which makes death not really feel as dramatic of a thing as it should be, which I guess is what they were going for with a dumbass. There's no heroic deaths or good guys and bad guys in this world, but a character death is still fundamentally supposed to be somewhat important. And I know this next point gets brought up a lot, and I do have something to add, but it's just so ridiculous, and I couldn't take the story seriously anymore. When I'm sitting here watching a fucking pregnant woman getting patched up in an ER clinic, and none of the characters in the scene are acknowledging how ridiculous the situation is, when there's hundreds, if not thousands, of other perfectly capable soldiers around, because I know there was pushback on this idea. Like maybe an animator or rigger who was making the scene, or the actor who plays Mel saw it and said, "Hey Neil, why the fuck is this pregnant woman out on active duty in a war zone and a zombie outbreak? Mel is a medic and she's out here doing this shit. Who approved the pregnant medic of all fucking people to go into a combat zone?" It'd be one thing to argue, oh yeah, well she's a soldier. It'd still be stupid, but there'd be a reason for it. But no, there is literally no reason for her to be out there. They built an entire part of their stadium for classrooms and young families, yet approved an expecting mother who is also said to be one of the best surgeons in Seattle to go out. Except there is a reason. I realize now, thinking back on the game, that the only reason Mel was out on active duty was solely to create conflict. Manny is going to go out with just Abby and then says something like, "Oh, you and Mel need bonding time," because this game doesn't know how to be interesting without all this melodramatic he said she said bullshit that goes nowhere because everyone involved ends up dying anyway. A game about zombies where nobody dies from infection. Even Owen, who I see people always say is one of the few decent people morally in this game because he stopped Manny from killing Ellie, when first of all, my man Jesse is right there. He literally did nothing wrong. And also because Owen was hired to fight him because he killed a guy and then felt bad about it. And it's really saying a lot when every character in the story is so bad that a guy who lets his pregnant girlfriend tour an active war zone and then cheats on her with his ex is the best character. I mean, fuck's sake. Him and Mel were held at gunpoint and his first instinct was to charge him with a gun unarmed. I'm sure that end well. We're no better than him if we kill him. Bro, look at where you are right now. You saw what Joel did, and right now you're seeing Abby's reaction to that, and you just somehow expect that to not to happen again, even though the situation is playing out way worse than what happened to Abby. Alright, I have been around the bush on Abby's half of the story enough, so I may as well just fully commit to talking about it. And to start, Abby is a character, and what she means to this game's story is just such a dumb premise. Look, this unnamed NPC that we changed and gaslighted you into believing was always Jerry by making the hospital scene in the PS5 remake of the first game be the one in part 2 and not the original PS3 and 4 versions had a daughter. How could you just kill him? Okay, you want to get that petty and bring up this topic. What about all the other unnamed NPCs I killed in the first game, and all the named ones I killed in the way to get to Abby? Am I also supposed to feel bad about killing Alan, or only when you want to wreck on him into being important because you didn't know what else to do with this fucking story? This is genuinely the dumbest fucking basis for a sequel I have ever seen. It's not just that they created a whole new character that wasn't at all mentioned in the first game, but that they then changed it around to fit the new story and be better because they knew that by itself it wasn't a solid concept. What do you mean the doctor was black and the room was filthy and they were wearing green? No, they weren't. It was Jerry. See, he's right there, remastered in 4K. Are you feeling okay, Grandpa? Let's get your catheter back in. The game is literally gaslighting you. I use the term gaslighting a lot as a joke, but by changing the scene in a remake to actually be this other version, they're actually attempting to make you believe it was always Jerry. And speaking of Jerry, the amount of pretentious parallels that this game tries to make between Ellie and Abby are so on the nose and blatant. Mel is Dina, Owen is Jesse, Lev is Ellie from the first game, the WLF Stadium is Jackson. Ellie going down the stairs to see Joel getting killed is the same as Abby running down the hallway to find her dad. It's just so glaringly obvious what they were going for. Oh my god, look, it's so touching. Abby also coincidentally had a bonding moment involving an escaped African zoo animal with her father at the St. Mary's Hospital in Salt Lake City the exact same day Ellie and Joel were there on April 28, 2034. Isn't that so crazy, guys? Isn't that so crazy and heartfelt and deep that this new character just so happened to experience an exact parallel of that same moment we all know you love from the first game, and it's one of the most touching and emotional scenes in all of gaming. Look, I even use the same music to drive the point home. You like this song, right? Do you care about her yet? Because we're really trying to make you care about her, which is why we're also going to make you replay the exact same hospital corridor scene 3 times over. We don't want you to think she's the good guy, because remember, in this world world there's no good guys or bad guys, but also we really want you to empathize with this character, and by our own admittance, this entire plot falls apart if you don't. The writing bias is so strongly towards Abby, and the writers can say all they want about how they aren't trying to replace Joel with Abby and how they aren't trying to manipulate you into liking Abby more than Ellie, but at the end of the day, they still want you to see and understand Abby's side of the story, and in their efforts to make Abby a flawed character, whether they realized it or not, they subconsciously created a way worse character morally than Ellie and favor the writing towards her. Ellie killed a dog, yeah, but it was in self-defense. They killed Shimmer just because they felt like it, okay? You eat babies! The difference between what Joel did and what Abby did is that before all those videos emerged of people atomizing the doctor, Joel didn't make Abby's dad suffer. Abby made the conscious decision to make Joel suffer and made Ellie watch rather than having the respect to take her out of the room. And huevos rancheros bet on Joel's corpse too. So the whole "there's no good guys" card goes fucking catapulting out the window, because while yes, both sides killed the other's father, Abby objectively did it in a much more gruesome and inhumane manner. Had Ellie not shown up and Owen stopped her, Abby would have kept going and torturing Joel. And just as a heads up, the only times Joel, Ellie, or Tommy have ever tortured people was to get information. They never did it simply for the pleasure of doing so and seeing someone die out of revenge. Joel's killing is never emotional and it's always pragmatic, and you can argue whether or not if that's also fucked up, especially since Joel's hinted to have been a hunter in the first game. Joel still never killed someone just for the sadistic enjoyment of doing so. The way Abby killed Joel is a massive overreaction. Like, I struggle to think of someone I've ever hated so much that I'd be willing to kill them like this. And the worst part about how Abby's friends killed Joel is they were out here taking fucking Polaroid. I can't imagine what has to be wrong with you, where you think a personal revenge mission 4 years in the making is the absolute best time to start taking Polaroids. You know what Ellie says? You know what Ellie fucking says in this game that Abby never does? She says, "I'm sorry." And Ellie is so mature that she even empathizes with Abby after adjusting her shoot Jesse, and she says, "I know why you killed Joel, it's because he killed your dad." Where was that moment for Abby? I'm putting on my condescending voice because at the end, when Abby was threatening Lev, I don't remember Abby ever saying anything even remotely on the lines of, "I understand why Joel killed my dad, because he's going to kill you and Joel didn't want that," despite Abby literally knowing that surgery would have killed Ellie. All I remember is Abby being more than willing to murder a pregnant woman, which is something Ellie was absolutely horrified about doing. Ellie also spared Abby of her own free will. That was her decision with nobody else around to influence her. And yet Abby would have gladly killed Tommy, Dina, and Ellie in the theater if there wasn't someone literally standing right next to her telling her not to. And she also would have continued torturing Joel had Owen not been there. Abby only ever does good things when there's someone immediately there next to her to beg her to, or when she wants to feel better about herself. When Ellie finds Abby's friends, she is still willing to mercy kill them and not torture them even with Joel dead. Jerry died, Abby makes Joel die slowly. Joel dies, Ellie still offers all of Abby's friends an ultimatum and only ever escalates situations when they do, which they always fucking do because they're evil, and Ellie still feels bad for having to kill them every single time. In the theater, Abby's stupid ass says, "You killed my friends," after she literally just Ubered back home from killing a bunch of her own WLF friends on an island beforehand. Even hypothetically, if Abby's friends didn't die, she still would have abandoned them all for Lev. That was a decision she was making entirely independent of anything Ellie was doing. Fuck man, at this point in day 3, Nick, Jordan, Noah, Leah, Mel, and Owen were all dead, and Abby still had no idea who the trespassers were. She assumed it was Tommy doing all of that until she gets to the theater and realizes it was all Ellie. And I doubt Abby's friend would have wanted to go with her to find the Fireflies after seeing her defect from WLF and killing a bunch of people. Like, I'm sure they knew some of the people that Abby killed. And that scene in particular, the one immediately after Isaac dies, where you're supposed to kill the WLF and escape from the island, that was another moment where my mind went over a tipping point. Actually, let me just list them all off to get them off my chest. Dina's pregnant reveal, the immediate smash cut switch to Abby's side in the theater, the Danny reveal, the truck scene with Abby and Mel, Abby and Owen's sex scene, the bit of gameplay immediately after Isaac dies, escaping the burning Serapha Island on horseback like this is fucking Uncharted, fighting Ellie, getting a tutorial on how to beat up her main character, and the absolute stun lock of seeing the ending, and then after that, the title screen changing to this afterwards. I distinctly remember audibly saying to myself, dude, what the fuck is this in my dark living room during all those moments.
You're my people.
I'm done. No!
Good, that's out there. That served no purpose to the video, other than as an excuse to vent. How are you doing? Damn, that's crazy. I don't care. Anyway, the justification directly from Neo for Abby turning on the WLF is that she was never actually invested in them in the first place. Abby only fell in with them because when Joel killed her dad, she lost purpose. And the WLF gave her a place to just essentially exist while she hyper-focused on killing Joel. And then after she kills Joel and realizes that she now has no purpose, and then through Lev and Yara, she finds purpose again, which is to find the Fireflies. And also the flashbacks with Owen attempt to hint that she never really cared about the WLF. But you could have done that better by having her attempt to continue her dad's work or secretly looking for the Fireflies throughout the entire time, rather than having her become the top Scar killer. So Abby's connection to the WLF is so shallow that she's willing to turn on them after 4 years of being with them and start killing them within 2 days. If her emotional attachment was that surface level, why the fuck didn't she just leave earlier? To turn around and start killing people you've known for that long in such a short period of time can't be chalked up to emotional indifference. That's a deep-rooted hatred. If that's the case, and this supposed lack of connection has been building up for so long, why did it take meeting some random kid and going to the hospital with him for her to undergo this massive emotional shift? If that's the case, you'd think that all it would take for her to bust out the 9-iron on some motherfuckers is them skipping her in line on burrito day. Abby's apparently so emotionally uninvested in the conflict with the Scars that she's willing enough to spare 2 of them after they saved her, but not all of them, just these 2. And it was things like this which made me completely unable to like Abby as a character. She's a hypocrite, plain and simple. As much as I don't like Mel, she was indeed spitting straight facts for real, yo, no cap, when she called Abby a piece of shit. Just because Abby is willing to switch sides after spending a small amount of time on the opposite side doesn't mean I am as well. Joel saved Abby's life and she still tortures him and kills him. A person completely unrelated to Joel saves her life and suddenly she's willing to kill her own friends. Ellie saves her and Lev's life at the end and that bitch doesn't even say thank you. In the theater, Abby says, "We let you live and you wasted it," despite the fact that she spent 4 years hunting Joel. Meanwhile, Ellie had only been doing it for 3 months. At one point, Abby says to herself after seeing a Scar memorial, "You want peace? Stay on your island." And it's so annoying how this character is able to realize how unreasonable it is to willingly go out and seek conflict and escalate situations rather than just minding your own business and be rational enough to think about that for an opposing side, but still be too fucking stupid to think that it would also apply to them. When you break things down, Abby was able to get away with way more by the end of the game. Yeah, her friends died, but she was already going to abandon them for Lev, who she was able to leave with, have a happy ending and find the Fireflies, by the way. Meanwhile, on Ellie's end, oh my god. Sure, Abby didn't kill as many people close to Ellie as Ellie did for Abby, but what Abby did do is something far, far worse. Leaving someone with a scar or permanent disability is far, far more of a cruel thing to do, in my opinion, than just killing them. Because now every time Ellie tries to play guitar and fails, Abby. Every time Dina looks at JJ or that scar on her chest, Abby, who killed his biological dad and ruined her relationship with Ellie. Every time that Tommy gets up and struggles to walk, Abby. Or Maria looks back on their relationship, Abby. Ellie lost everything because of Abby. When you really think about it, Lev and Abby are literally stuck in a toxic relationship. I only have you around because it makes you feel better about killing that guy. And I only have you around because I'm stuck with you and don't know what it means for someone to genuinely care about me because my own mother tried to kill me, my people rejected me, and my sister's first instinct when I shaved my head was to hit me. The basis for Joel and Ellie's relationship was something shitty happened to me, but through us I'm able to recover and finally move on from that. Not I did something shitty and now I need a way to mentally overwrite that and trick my brain to believe I'm actually a good person by focusing on this one good thing rather than all the other shitty things I've done. If you go back to their first scene, Lev was originally going to let Abby die by hanging for the first time they met. If not for Yara, they wouldn't even have a connection. Yeah, Joel didn't initially like Ellie, but he wasn't gonna let her die. He was a bit of a hard ass. Nobody waited 7 years to get the exact same character dynamic as the first, but done infinitely worse. Yeah, these characters have one of the best and most well-developed relationships in all of gaming. So instead of giving players more of that, let's ruin their relationship, ruin both of them as characters, and then bring in new characters with that exact same dynamic. People will like them, I'm sure about it. Like, if you love Ellie and Joel so much that you're willing to copy and paste them, just give me Ellie and Joel. Now let's shift from Abby as a character to a part of the game as a whole. There is one other story that I have read that followed the same format of telling one half from one character's perspective and then the other half through another, and that is The Collector, more specifically the book. And I'm gonna be real, honestly, I don't remember anything specific about the book or have any real comparisons. I read it in my junior year of high school and remember thinking that the format it was written in sucked, and that the first half was really good and the second half sucked. And aside from just not liking Abby as a character, it wasn't until I saw this graph that I realized all of my issues with her half of the story. This goes back to that point I mentioned at the beginning of the video where after I finished the game, everywhere I looked, people were putting into words things I noticed in my playthrough but couldn't describe. This screenshot from How to Divide a Fanbase, holy fuck. I just about shit my pants, started crying when I saw this. You see, like, this piece of art so wonderfully puts it. Abby's section is nothing but random ass side quests that don't at all overlap with Ellie's half of the story. There is no overarching goal like Ellie's, and instead this whole 10-hour segment of the game acts as development for her because she feels guilty about killing Joel, and is attempting to make up for that by helping random people who have no connection to him. The issue with that is that I understood that. When Abby went back on day 2 to check on Lev and Yara, I understood what she was doing. That didn't at all make up for what she had done, and she was still a shit character, but I got the point. But even still, I had to play 2 more full days as Abby, one of which doesn't even end up mattering because Yara dies, as the game really tries to drive home the point that Abby is a person too, and attempting to make you sympathize with her. And not only was there nothing to hold me over for her section of the story character-wise, but also tension-wise. Because maybe the one thing that keeps you invested in her section is, oh, how did Abby learn Ellie was at the theater? Except the issue with that is that I already fucking put 2 and 2 together during the original theater scene. Abby showed up and I thought, wait, how'd she get here? And then my brain immediately answered that and said, oh yeah, Ellie left the map at the aquarium. So her entire section feels like fluff, since there was literally no direct connection between what Abby was doing and what Ellie was doing until the end of day 3. And so, like a majority of players, I saw Abby's section as that one annoying bit in the game before the story got good again. And seeing everything from Abby's perspective after Ellie's perspective makes the things you see feel more like Easter eggs or shitty crossovers than actual emotional moments. Instead of the intended emotional weight of, oh shit, I was the one doing that, it's, oh yeah, I remember doing that, or oh okay, that thing completely unrelated to Ellie was also happening, that's cool I guess. By the way, what was the point in making you play the theater scene as Abby? Granted, it also would have been annoying to have you play this scene as Ellie and win the game and losing the cutscene, but it could have ended in just like a mutual draw and not have been so glaringly one-sided. Lev could have gotten injured, and so before carrying out all that other shit, Ellie and Abby could have both agreed to retreat, and that tending to people close to them is more important than killing each other, which would have made Ellie going back later on actually feel like a ridiculous, crazy, unnecessary revenge trip, because Frost's encounter with Abby wouldn't have ended so negatively and been so one-sided. I assume it was to make players feel conflicted and think, oh, I don't want to hurt Ellie, but I don't want Abby to die, what do I do? But the fact that almost everyone who got to this scene let Ellie kill Abby a few times speaks volumes on how whatever the fuck they were going for did not work.
Now that we've experienced the canon ending, let's look at some fanfiction. So that was the fanfiction, because of course any fan would have written it the same way.
What a shock. Players don't enjoy seeing a character that they love get the shit beat out of them, and they especially don't like being the ones behind that. I was already aware of that in the first game when I saw an infected rip Joel open through the mouth, and I made it a point to not die again. I was aware of that when I played Bioshock Burial T Episode 2, which sucks by the way, I hate that game, and I had to sit there and watch Elizabeth get a fucking transorbital lobotomy from a first-person perspective for 2 whole minutes. And I was aware of that when I played Dead Space and I had to sit there and watch the Divider kill Isaac and then puppet his corpse around. It isn't some form of deep, subversive, or experimental writing. It's just basic fucking observation, and I didn't need this game to tell me that. There's so many conveniences throughout the entire fight too. Ellie throws her weapon, and in the kerfuffle that happens to Tommy, Ellie reaches for Jesse's gun while she's distracted, which as we can see here is right by her feet. Yet it still takes Ellie 5 whole seconds to bend down and get it. And why does it take her this unrealistically long? It's because the plot needed it to. Ellie shouldn't have even had to reach for Jesse's gun, because later on during the fight she pulls out her shotgun out of her backpack, and she also literally has another handgun and a rifle. But don't worry about that. The shotgun and bow, yes, worry about that, but those other 2 guns Ellie has don't matter. Suspension of disbelief. Her character's an idiot. Ellie ambushes Abby with a wooden plank instead of just shooting her. When Abby is banging Ellie against the ground, and later on when she's choking her, if you feel the QTE, Ellie stabs Abby in the neck in both of those scenes, but when you succeed in the choking one, she stabs Abby in the leg for some reason, and immediately after that, as Abby's on the ground fucking crawling, Ellie just kind of sits there and stares at her and then runs away to set traps for no reason, and you can't even argue that it's to get the drop on Abby, because Ellie has the advantage here. Ellie also has a machete, but only in that one death scene. Don't worry about where it is in the cutscenes or anything. And then immediately after that, Dina comes in slashing at Abby rather than stabbing at her. So in gameplay, your character isn't a total idiot. I mean, the bottle thing and Ellie not using listening mode is so dumb, but it's still generally the same Ellie you play as. But in the cutscenes, that is just nowhere to be found. You know what game did this exact same thing of making you play as the enemy to make you understand their side of the story and then fight your main character? The Life of Dunwall DLC for Dishonored. Technically, Dishonored itself did it because it made you fight Dowd, who was basically just you, the player, since he has all the same powers. And you know how frantic I was in Dishonored when I fought Dowd, and he started doing all the exact same cheap tricks that I'd been using on NPCs up to that point that always worked, like blinking or freezing time. You can't do that, that's my thing. In that boss fight, I was pushed out of my comfort zone. I had to actually think on my toes and figure out a way to do with a scenario I'd never been put in before, where I have to fight someone with the exact same skill set and advantages that I do. Because the developers planned around that and created an interesting boss fight using that's still in character for Dowd, rather than letting you freeze time and stealth kill Dowd like every other enemy. In the Life of Dunwall, you play that exact same scene but from Dowd's perspective. So now you fight Corvo, who's the main character of the first game, and they kept it consistent. They didn't turned Corvo into a dumbass who ran around screaming, "Where are you, Abby?" and has their AI reduced to the same level of intelligence as an NPC, and the exact same trick of listening for an enemy and using a bottle to stun them, even using up until that point, still works. What makes this whole thing especially annoying, aside from all the conveniences, is that Ellie was literally in an encounter exactly like this, but flipped in her fight with David. It isn't just the fact that Ellie falls for basic shit she herself has used plenty of times against NPCs and infected in both games, but also she's been on the other end of this exact scenario before and doesn't use any of that prior experience. That isn't a technical limitation. This isn't a problem where, oh well, Ellie has beat up to win the boss fight, because the Knife of Dunwall did this exact same thing and honor their character's abilities in 2013. It is an issue of laziness and blatant disrespect to this character's intelligence rather than a constraint of the medium that this story is being told in. And while we're bringing up games from 10 years ago that did this game but way better, Far Cry 3, don't really need to say more than that, just Far Cry 3. The first game made you care about Ellie, they made you play as her, so when you do, you're like, oh, this is cute, I have a little bow, and I'm more limited than Joel. But 2 makes you play as Abby, as it's also attempting to make you care about her, but also Nora, Owen, Mel, Manny, whoever the fuck else was there, which is just way too much to ask for in aspect of a player. And this sudden shift just ruins any replayability, because unlike the first game where you keep all your weapons the whole way through until the end, you lose all your shit as Ellie as soon as Abby's section starts and vice versa. I mean, just the whole structure of this game with flashbacks all in the wrong order, the way it's told is so confusing as well. Obviously this image from the closer look, which belongs in the Louvre, perfectly summarizes it, but to really detail it, in this game, you have 2 ongoing storylines that aren't told at the same time as one another, and instead are told in giant blocks that got kind of crossover, but not in any significant way until their respective ends. And also 2 flashback storylines that are also fleshing out these characters' past and attempting to catch up to the future to justify what they're currently doing, except one of them is just rehashing the same scene over and over again, and they're all just basically interchangeable. There is unironically flashbacks within flashbacks in this game, which is always a go-to shitty narrative device that people say as a joke because of how overused flashbacks are, and because no competent writer is stupid enough to use them. But nope, this game has them. Several of them actually. Ellie's flashbacks in particular bother me so much because I see them and I keep thinking of the game that this could have been. I see that scene in the ski lodge or the museum and all that runs through my head is, just give me that. You're literally so close. Why aren't you just this other game? I think it's very telling when universally among the fans and even the actors and writers themselves, everyone's favorite scene in this game is one that resembles the first game the most. Because there are no moments of genuine happiness in this game or levity in the current story other than the music scene. Just off the top of my head, the first game had the giraffes, the drive with Ellie and Joel, and the beginning of the university chapter where it plays this song, which I know the giraffe scene is like this scene in this game, but in my opinion, the very beginning of the university chapter is really underrated. It's just so serene, and I always loved getting to that section of my replay playthroughs. But after all those flashbacks in the Seattle section, you get to the farm, which honestly I thought was a dream sequence. You go to California, and right when you think you're back in the present, there's another flashback with Lev and Abby in California, and then you're back in the present, for real this time. Until you get another flashback with Joel, and then the game is over and you're in the present again. And to end off Abby's section, don't think I was gonna leave Isaac out of this, alright? Nah, nothing in this game escapes me. Isaac is meant to be the stereotypical villain behind the scenes. You know, the whole trope of media where you're going after someone who's part of an organization, and then the head of that organization is a lot worse. Isaac is supposed to be that, but he has absolutely zero presence and is literally a fucking joke. Everyone is always scared of him in cutscenes and he's lit in all these ways. Oh really, Nora? He gave you that fucking look and that was enough to shut you down and stop asking questions. I have never seen a character who's supposed to be important command less authority in every scene they're in than Isaac. It feels as if you're supposed to find Isaac intimidating simply because everyone in the story says he is, rather than him conveying that in any meaningful way. Oh, Isaac is so scary. He tortures people and he took down Fedra, the incompetent military force which you saw failed in a bunch of different cities in the first game with all the abandoned QZs. We can't have peace. We need to kill all of them. I can perfectly read you and know things that are literally impossible for me to know because that makes me intimidating. Never mind the fact that if I'd been wrong, I would have just pulled a massive secret. Owen gets 0 chances because I am a pragmatic leader who's all about justice. Whilst I sit here with my man boobs protruding from my green sweater. Isaac feels like one of those managers you never actually see do any work and always pushes difficult shit they don't want to do onto you and then criticize what you're doing every step of the way from the security cameras in their office with the AC. Isaac is one of those people who would monitor employees' computer activity when they're working from home. There was originally supposed to be more development for Isaac, where he was an ex-firefighter that knew Abby's dad, which is why Abby went with him, and that could have been really interesting because of how much this game loves to rely on surface level parallels between Ellie and Abby. It would have been really cool considering that Marlene took care of Ellie because Marlene knew Ellie's mom. That would have been one parallel I actually would have enjoyed, but then obviously you both know that got cut because apparently that wasn't deemed worthy enough and it felt like fluff. So now Isaac is just a complete fucking blank slate who comes across across as a micromanaging asshole who everyone just blindly follows because of the position he holds, rather than anything he says or does. And to close off Seattle, although I wasn't able to be totally interested in it because of the story being told and how it's formatted, I still love the world building in Seattle and showing how different cities handle the outbreak. Like, are you kidding me? I love Seattle in this game. It's absolutely gorgeous. Even if the story was awful, just existing in Seattle on day 3 as Ellie was so cozy. Going in and out of buildings and listening to how the rain sounds, it was so good. And now for the farm bit. All I have to say about the farm is that it feels really disjointed how Tommy's absent for most of the story and then shows up at the end to push Ellie again for revenge. It feels as if Neil and Hallie just forgot Tommy was even in this game because yes, he does go to Seattle and we do see some of the stuff he does, but we still never really get any moments of reflection or introspection for him. I mean, Tommy was not only in the room with Ellie when Joel died, he was there when everything went down. And we really should have gotten at least one scene of him having some sort of regret over that, but nope, only Ellie gets trauma and development over Joel's death. And now for Santa Barbara. I love the fact that we collectively as a species were so empty by this point of the game that we all just immediately and unconditionally loved him just to have a glimmer of joy in our lives. Simply because he was a remotely lighthearted character and nothing more than that. We all looked at him and said, oh my god, finally something somewhat entertaining and laid back in this fucking game. And here we see Fat Geralt coming on the 40-yard line, activating his Hatsu with a right hook to shake the very foundations of Mount Olympus itself. Homie makes direct contact and rocks Lil Bro's shit so hard he's back into a Sarah fight, bounces his head off the garage, and finishes off his Street Fighter combo with a full body twist afterwards. And with the way his head bounces off that concrete, that is 100% a broken fucking skull. Just an all-around solid punch. My man put his whole pussy into that punch. Now time for the ending. I just wanted to add that bit in there because having just a little bit of happiness right before the ending makes this video lore accurate when I played through 2020. And this is my way of coming to terms with that trauma. Originally, Abby was supposed to die. In fact, in their own words, that was the case for 50% of development. And then after she killed Abby, Ellie would go back to the farm and then be tortured and then spared by a relative of someone Ellie killed. And like, why did 2 failed pitches for both of these games involve the main character getting tortured at the end? But anyway, the writers thought that Ellie sparing Abby was, and I quote, more true to her character. I'm sorry, and what character was that exactly? Is that the Ellie who's willing to kill Abby in the theater? Was that the Ellie who walked across the fucking Mojave to get here? Actually, no, I know. It was the Ellie that made a promise to Tommy to kill Abby. Damn, how can I forget? And I wish the ending gave you a choice. Not because it would have made the ending better. Like I said, the game would still be ass, even if you got revenge. But I wish there was a choice. Just because then we could get a solid number to show how many players still hated Abby by the end of their playthrough and how they completely failed at making care about her. We really went through a great length to make people care about this character. I'm sure nobody killed her at the end. Oh, remember how I complained about the conveniences in the theater fight? That also applies to the ending, and for both sides too. Abby's able to take the knife out and stab Ellie with it if you fail, and for some reason, Ellie not only puts her backpack down, but rather than using one of the 2 guns she has on her person, she instead uses her fists, the weakest part of her character, which is why she has a knife. And look, I understand the ending, okay? The message is that if Ellie killed Abby, the cycle of violence would have just continued and Ellie would have just lost her humanity, and now Ellie ends the game where Abby started her section, and Abby letting Ellie go eventually saved her. Just a bunch of surface level bullshit about how violence is always bad. Except the thing is, the cycle wouldn't have continued if Ellie killed Abby and Lev because nobody gives a shit about them anymore. They don't have any friends or family that are gonna come hunt down Ellie. And also, this decision from a story perspective makes no sense. If Ellie had shown just some signs of reluctance or hesitation before the final fight, that wouldn't have been nearly as bad because it would have at least made sense for her and the player. What if they played into Ellie's previously established trauma where she kept seeing Joel and they fight club that shit, or on the way to Santa Barbara, or on the way to kill Abby, she keeps being reminded of Joel and seeing him in small things or during combat encounters, especially since they already did this in Seattle after Ellie kills Mel, and instead of Tommy's voice, she hears Joel. It isn't the fact that the opportunity for this was literally right there. It's the fact that they already did it twice and had the idea for these 2 side characters, but not the final fucking fight. Let's compare this to the first ending, because they're both twist endings. You take Ellie all the way across the country and then right at the end say, no, fuck you and take her for yourself. In 2, you travel across Death Valley to kill Abby and then say, nah, I'm good, and then don't. But the main difference that the first game did that way better. Regardless of what you think about Joel's decision, it is objectively better written and foreshadowed, better than what happens in the second game. There's a scene right before the hospital where Joel says, we don't have to do this, tries to convince Ellie to leave with him, and then immediately afterwards he says, I'm not leaving without you. So now when you see Joel make the decision to in fact not leave without Ellie, even if you feel bad about his decision, which if you do you're a loser, it's still perfectly in character for him and it makes sense. I don't really mean you're a loser, by the way. You know, people are open to their own opinions. But at the same time, like, anyone that tries to say what Joel did in the ending of the first game was bad must be forgetting the fact that the Fireflies didn't let Joel talk to Ellie, only told him to search to a killer after the fact, didn't tell Ellie about the procedure and did it against her will. They also wanted to kill Joel just because they felt like it. When they first encountered Joel and Ellie, their first instinct wasn't to help Ellie, who wasn't breathing. It was to knock Joel unconscious while he was doing CPR on her. The Fireflies didn't deliver on their end of the deal and give him the guns that they stole from him, or how the Fireflies were gonna just leave Joel in the city by himself without his backpack. Also, that guard Ethan was a dick, fuck him. Let's Last of Us 2 the first ending. So instead of those 6 scenes I mentioned where Joel said we don't have to do this and I'm not leaving without you, which directly give the player and Joel an external reason and motivation for what he does, instead, Joel is about to leave the hospital, has a flashback of himself saying those things to Ellie, and then goes back and says Ellie. It's just so confusing for no reason. I got a headache just from trying to figure out how to word that and write it. Why wouldn't you just have the motivator for the ending of the game play before the final confrontation, rather than not at all mentioning it beforehand, and then bringing it up during the fight and elaborating on it afterwards? Especially when the recipe for that was literally right there with Ellie herself saying that she keeps seeing Joel in small things. And to really just rub that in, Ellie says the exact words of, "I can't let you leave," except she can because, oh look, she had a flashback. Originally, there wasn't even going to be a flashback here. They were going to let Ellie spare Abby and that was it. But then when they had people playtest a fight, they said, what the fuck is this? Why did she do that? So, you know, could have been worse. And don't you even think to try and tell me that Ellie showing regret in Seattle foreshadowed the ending where she spares Abby. Because even when all those things are fresh in her mind, she still kills Abby in the theater with no hesitation. Ellie killing Abby is bad, but also she is more than willing to do so at this earlier part of the story. Why did Ellie have to lose everything? I mean, she's already pretty fucked up by that in the first game, and she even said her biggest fear was to end up alone. And it wasn't as if Ellie always had some trauma that was the direct cause and reason of her always losing people close to her. She wasn't an asshole who pushed people away. She didn't make selfish decisions, and yeah, she was immune, but it wasn't a core thing that everyone she knew turned and died. Fuck you, Ellie. You were born with this mutation you had no say in wanting or not. You're never gonna make any friends. You don't deserve to be happy. Anytime you love someone and finally open yourself up to them and accept that maybe this time will be different. Maybe they won't die or leave me this time. Or even if they do, maybe you'll have just some small part of them with me I can always remember them with. We're gonna make all of that just come crashing down again and again until you're this lonely, hardened husk of a survivor because fuck you for having this obsession with revenge that wasn't at all part of your character before this game. Ellie lost her mom's knife during the fight. I bet some of you didn't even realize that too. The only thing Ellie has left from Joel is that he taught her how to swim. That's something, I guess, right? Trust me, Ellie, I also wanted your immunity to mean something, but it doesn't at all affect this game's plot, and it has no relevance to it. Ellie's immunity comes into play killing Nora, and when she tells Dina getting high, and then the train tunnel, and in neither instance does Dina even really seem to care or react as dramatically as she should, because her being pregnant is more important, apparently. It feels more like a thing Ellie just kind of has, rather than a fundamental part of her character, and honestly, I completely forgot Ellie was even immune until the end when she got bitten in Santa Barbara. And also, Ellie had flashbacks of Joel when she was drowning Abby, but Jesse, another person Abby killed, who was the father of her child and was seemingly one of her few friends in Jackson, nope, nothing there. But if they did that, then that raises some issues with the story they want to tell because Jesse supported Ellie wanting to get revenge, and it's like, fuck, do we have this character acknowledge her best friend whose child she's raising that got killed by this person? Or do we just skip over that for this cutscene to force this other plot point home, despite that feeling extremely unnatural? Yeah, fuck it. Who cares about Jesse? I mean, Ellie does because Jesse's parents visit her and Dina and she's raising his kid, but she also doesn't because when she has this killer at her mercy, there isn't a single thought of him. Ellie isn't able to forgive Seth, but she's able to forgive Abby. And because the first game had an open ending, this one does too. And bro, where are you going? You ain't got no bitches, no parents, no home, and no... A sequel at its core should expand upon or develop the world and characters established in the first. Always. I mean this in the best way, and this is gonna sound crazy, but stick with me here. Red Dead 2 is a game that did not need to exist. From a consumer perspective, yes, absolutely. But from a story perspective, the first game sets up and completes John and the gang's story perfectly fine. I wanted a Red Dead 2, but looking back, I actually had nothing more I wanted from the story, and I just liked the idea because the game was fun. But Red Dead 2 looked at the first game and its open ending and said, yeah, we can't and shouldn't do anything after that. Let's instead make a prequel that further expands upon and honors the first game. And I'm not saying this game should have been a prequel, but what I am saying is that The Last of Us 2 could have gone a lot of different directions with its story. It didn't have to be the story about sexual violence. Yes, making a sequel is objectively harder than making a standalone game because you're more limited with what you can do, but anyone who acts like this is the only story that could have been told, that the game had to be formatted this way and be divisive, is a case in point example of settling for less. Genuinely, and I mean this with no sarcasm, I am speaking with complete sincerity here. Where could the plot go after this game? There's nothing here. Nothing from the first game was built upon or expanded in any way. In fact, it just ruins all three returning characters. Nothing new introduced is interesting or lasts long enough to carry a sequel, and simply put, this game did not need to exist.
What? Is that it?
You asked for it.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.